Fred Richani, TSC News. We have right here on the line a special guest. We're going to be recapping the year in pro wrestling, going over the biggest stories of 2019, heading into 2020. I got my main man. He's known as Global Ed, a.k.a. Ed Molina. He's a podcaster of his own, an astute observer and fan of professional wrestling. He's from the New York area right here, contributing to public service, doing some great things in the city, and he's here to help me recap all things 2019. Ed, what's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going, Fred? Thanks for the invite. Much appreciated. Shout out to my dude Fuzz and Fuzz Freak Show on Blog Talk Radio. Pretty much more from a sports podcast, so pretty much just kicking it about wrestling, a lot of different angles. So, Fuzz is more the fan perspective, where I'm more kind of like, but the business side fascinates me as much as what's going on in the ring. So
you and I both worked at Spike TV when they had Impact Wrestling around the same time, yet we never crossed paths until earlier this year when we saw each other at Ring of Honor at Madison Square Garden, which is pretty crazy after all these years, but it was good to run into you, and who knew that would be the high point of Ring of Honor maybe for the rest of the time. I think the biggest story is that AEW came into existence. It was confirmed January 1st, 2019. I remember going live here on TSC at 2 a.m. in the morning after watching Being the Elite and talking about it. We were unsure about all these different things, but we knew a few things. We knew that Tony Khan, the son of Shad Khan, was involved. We knew that reportedly $100 million was allocated to start up AEW. We knew they were linked to TNT. We knew that they were going to get big TV, and we knew that the Elite, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and Cody Rhodes were a part of the whole deal, but we didn't know what would happen from there. And hey, let's start with the good. They've drawn some ratings. If you include DVR ratings, they've done anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5 million, which is huge for a new startup company. They have sold out shows. They've even drawn, not sold out some shows, but still drawn around 4,000 or 5,000 people, which, by the way, folks, is more consistently than TNA Impact Wrestling ever did over the course of 15 years. I think their biggest crowd was like maybe 6,000, 7,000 people.
Something like that, yeah.
So that's pretty incredible. Now, on top of that, they've done, 3 pay-per-views that have been at an average of 100,000 buys, which is more than TNA ever did, which I think is even more than ECW ever did, to put it into perspective, and even more than some late WCW pay-per-views before that promotion died. So that is all good. Yet here we are, heading into 2020. By the time y'all watching this, it's 2020. And creatively, logistically, they do seem a bit in disarray 12 weeks into this AEW experiment. Where do you grade AEW right now going into 2020?
I'm a little more optimistic. It's been clunky. It's been stop and go. They've had some great moments. I think the Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes was a good highlight for them. I think introducing the Lucha Brothers to a bigger American market outside of like your Lucha Underground fans and your Lucha fans, that's been pretty big. So there's been a lot of highlights and stuff to work on. On the production side, there's a lot to be said for. Like, I think people that know way more about production have been very critical, and rightfully so, of even story building. It's like Kenny Omega's his worst booker. Like, however you feel about New Japan or Gato, like, he knew how to book Omega. And maybe that's more a testament to how great Okada is, but still, like, Kenny Omega is better than how he's booking himself. And he says he's not, but, and maybe that's part of the problem. I understand that they don't want writers per se, but, wrestling is still like comic books or even Shakespeare or even just a play. You're telling a story, and there's a certain basic structure of story, beginning, middle, end. And sometimes being in different places at the same time works. And then there's days where, I wasn't as down on that ending to that last live AEW as other people were, but I get it why they're mad. I think the problem is that because they're backed by a billionaire and because of the WCW legacy and the success of ECW, we're kind of measuring AEW on the ghost of other brands instead of letting them go through their growing pains. And part of that is the Twitter mob, like, with any stands in any business, they're going to be loud and vocal. And in a way, the Bucks and Omega have put themselves in a hole being about the fans. Well, sometimes the fans aren't the best bookers. And so I think they're just trying to figure it out. They don't have a Paul Lee back there who did, uh, ECW. They don't have a Eric Bischoff. How do you feel about Eric Bischoff? He had experience in ESPN. He had experience at AWA. Like, he's an old school AWA guy. He was their announcer, if I'm not mistaken. And so he kind of had a mind for it. And I think somebody's got to step up kind of in that role. And maybe it's Arn,
Arn Anderson.
Yes, maybe it's Arn. Maybe that's what they needed. Enough. He's been around Vince long enough to know what works. He's also been around Dusty as a booker to know what works. He knows Cody from being a booker at WWE. So maybe it's Arn. Maybe that's a solution, but they're missing something. And I think for the most part, they've leveraged the ratings. They've leveraged the buzz. That was the thing that impressed me. Like, you had Andrew Yang shouting out Cody Rhodes. You realize how insane that is? Like, think about if you'd have told me in '86, that I'm aging myself, that a presidential candidate, I picture Walter Mondale shouting out Mr. T and Hogan at WrestleMania. Like, that's how insane it was. You had Andrew Yang shouting out, "Hey, good luck on your debut show." I think part of the difficulty was getting off the ground. Boom, they got off the ground, and now it's a matter of building on the successes they have. That's going to be the key. They have a lot of good successes. They have some really, really good talent there. Maybe they need some sort of direction with the booking, and I don't know where that's going to come from, considering almost like the indie vibe that they're trying. It's like they're trying to be big time in indie at the same time. And in the indies, I understand, the fans dictate. That's how you get a Joey Ryan over. I don't get it. I ain't knocking it. My man's getting paid. Shout out to Joey Ryan on that end. But I don't get that suplex thing. And yet they're trying to appeal to Joey Janela's crowd as they are to disgruntled WWE fans or fans that think are disgruntled. So, because there's always going to be that comparison with the biggest dog in the yard to take that Roman Reigns, term. That's WWE that's been doing this for longer, So it's I think they're in the right direction, but the criticism is valid. It's valid, and not everyone's going to get Orange Cassidy, I don't know, but I think they're headed in the right direction.
Man, that's some good insight. That's like, it's almost like you covered this stuff, Ed. Now, I am somebody that has been very critical of AEW. I want them to succeed. I think it's great for the business, and it's been so long since we've had a legitimate threat. They're a bigger threat than TNA was. This is the biggest threat WWE's had since WCW. Not so much to put them out of business or anything like that. Nobody wants to see WWE go out of business, but just to create an alternative, a viable, potentially profitable alternative. But I've just seen a lot of missteps. You mentioned before on social media. It seems like constantly Brandy or the Bucks, who have now deleted Twitter, or Cody Rhodes are getting into some flame wars with certain fans or trolls, and I think they should ignore them when they're the execs of the company. I saw AEW recently tweet when they claimed they signed Chris Statlander that they called her Cat Statlander on the graphic, and they had to retweet it, I think almost thrice. It was kind of ridiculous. And then, speaking of Chris Statlander, there's a show, and by the time you guys watch this, it'll have aired already, where they booked Chris Statlander, who's a rising women's star for them, taking on Riho, the women's champion, for the world title. And they're promoting this match, building her up as a contender. And then they randomly decide, you know what, we're going to book a four-way instead without Chris Statlander because, oh, by the way, it turns out that she has an independent wrestling booking that she has to fill. And the fact that nobody checked this and that nobody said, hey, let's figure this out. Let's maybe delay this match a week. It kind of boggles my mind. Instead, she's doing this indie booking with Bar Wrestling, which I believe is run by Joey Ryan. And they're booking a four-way with Riho and Hikaru Shida and a couple other women who, oh, by the way, were not ranked the number one contender before. They say wins and losses matter, but now they're doing a random four-way. I get that they're trying to be transparent and say, hey, it's our F-up and we screwed up and yada yada, but I feel like it would have been easier if they just maybe sent another talent to Bar Wrestling, or maybe just thrown some money at the promoter and said, hey, we're sorry, our bad, or, just delay the match. And it's like you said, I feel like they're trying to cater to two different crowds. They're trying to cater to the indie niche audience, and at the same time, you're also trying to present something new. And in some ways, I feel like they're capping their audience. They're at the moment, NXT has started to win the ratings battle. But when you break it down, right, these two shows are essentially splitting the market share on Wednesdays, and they are splitting what used to be the old Impact Wrestling rating on Spike, which was like 1.5 million, 1.6 million, somewhere around that range. So while this is good for wrestling fans, I feel like both brands, but particularly AEW, are catering more towards fans that already exist as opposed to creating new fans. What do you think about that theory?
I'd agree with that. Well, with NXT, it's kind of fascinating because it's funny how NXT can be owned by WWE and the WWE universe can not know that brand exists. And the fact that they've spun it into a third brand that started, it's still to some degree developmental. It has been, talk about turning, chicken crap into chicken salad, as Brock Lesnar says in a much different, manner. Like and to have it draw the audience that it's doing. And yeah, you're right. It is that old Impact crowd that was looking for something new. I give them credit to that. And the thing is, it's like, it's still under the WWE umbrella. Like, it's almost like they're giving the fans that were disgruntled with WWE something new to watch, but still WWE branded. We'll get to, I think a lot of that has to do with Johnny Wrestling. I think a lot of that has to do with Adam Cole. I know there's a lot of folks in the forefront before, like Neville/Pac and Charlotte and Bayley that kind of help elevate NXT. But I think keeping Gargano there and Adam Cole, who you see so much of Shawn Michaels in him, and he's working backstage. That's not an accident. I think Shawn Michaels sees a lot of, himself in Adam Cole, who I had actually Fuzz had as Wrestler of the Year. That's kind of been amazing. And then to put what has been an offshoot against an upstart, it's almost like sending, you remember the Transformer Soundwave?
Yeah.
So you remember how he had the cassettes? It's like he sent Rumble and Buzzard to go at AEW. Like, he didn't even send Soundwave. Like, yo, chill here for a moment. Let me go send, Rumble. And it's created more revenue for WWE as if they weren't already making money hand over fist. And again, this is much like combat sports. It still is prize fighting at the end of the day. It's, what's best for business. And for all the knocks WWE, they're again the biggest dog in the yard. And I think that's what AEW's got to get over, to your earlier point about, the Twitter mob. You're trying to appeal to people that are never happy. And I'm sorry, there's a segment of wrestling fans that get on Twitter. It doesn't even matter if it's Ring of Honor, which, okay, they kind of deserve a lot of criticism. Impact. It doesn't matter. It's just a set of fans that are always just going to be miserable. Like, why cater to them? I actually think the Bucks getting off Twitter was the best thing that could have happened to them. I'm serious about that. They help build a brand through Twitter, but like everything with the Twitter world, what goes up, they must destroy. And so maybe them getting off of Twitter is what's best for the creative process of AEW. Maybe Cody needs to get off of Twitter. I understand he's got to sell the brand and whatnot, but let Joey Janela do that. He's got his fan base. Let Darby Allin do that. There's guys on your roster, Sammy Guevara, he's killing it on how he's using social media. It's a lot like Tyler Breeze, but shoot, in this business, it's a copycat league, one person's RKO is Tama Tonga's stun gun. So, but I think, and this is inescapable for AEW, they're always going to be compared to that big dog in the yard because of that $1 billion that they have. They had real money. That's when you knew these guys weren't messing around. When they got Tony Khan and that Khan brand, however you feel about the Jaguars, they own a soccer team in England. They have success in the sports world. They had ends. You knew that Cody was and the Bucks and Omega were no longer messing around. And so it's now what happens with the partnership, who knows? I don't know. I had issues where, NBA on TNT, they did a promo where LeBron and AD looked like the Hart Foundation, and the Greek Freak looked like the Ultimate Warrior, and I forgot the other one looked like Captain
Jack.
Stack.
You're referring to the NBA on TNT account tweeting out kind of like a funny meme or whatever picture, kind of like a cartoon of these NBA stars dressed as WWE wrestlers when they're the ones that have AEW on their freaking network.
Yo, I lost it. I'm like, yo, that is what a blown opportunity to have the Milwaukee Bucks and do like have the Greek Freak, and I don't know who the other player was, but dressed like the Young Bucks.
I think too it's because they own Bleacher Report, and Bleacher Report still does cover WWE and has a lot of media access with WWE. I think sometimes you got to tiptoe that weird line. You know what I mean? Like you have AEW, but at the same time, your Bleacher Report has a very big wrestling section. I mean, I'll say this: like you talk about Twitter, that was posted on social media. It's still a smaller segment of the audience than TV, and on TV they did promote AEW with Chris Jericho, although you did have Charles Barkley get a dig in on the Jacksonville Jaguars. He asked Chris Jericho, so tell us about AEW. He's like, well, I was approached by the ownership of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's like, that's not saying much.
Well, they got the issues, and that's on Tom Coughlin. As a Giants fan, I kind of know how that goes with Tom Coughlin has a way of doing business that's kind of antiquated in today's NFL culture. That's for another podcast for another day. So
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think there's just some quality. You know what it is? Quality control. That's the phrase that needs to stick with AEW throughout 2020. Quality control. They have talent. Okay, they got the goods. They have a unique presentation. There's a lot of color, and the arenas are very well lit. And 96% of the time, the crowd is super hot for everything they put on there. It comes off like a hot product, but at the end of the day, you need some more creative consistency. You can't have, one day this team beats the Bucks, and then they lose the next week, and then you book Hangman on Page and Pac in back-to-back matches when Hangman just got a big singles win, and then you do an MJF promo where he reveals he hired the Butcher and the Blade, but you put it on Twitter. And then you keep MJF off TV for 1 week, and then Riho's off TV for several weeks, and it's just kind of a mess. There really needs to just be some quality control, some linear storytelling. They're going all over the place, and to your point about how the Bucks and Cody and Kenny are losing a lot and quote unquote putting over a lot of people and trying to give the shine to other guys, they got to establish themselves first. I don't know if it's arrogance or just misreading the market or whatever the case may be. But while they are draws to an extent, they are not draws to they're not proven draws to a television audience. They're still relatively new, particularly the Bucks and Kenny Omega in North America. That's not an insult on them. It's just what it is. Same deal with Adam Cole before he got in NXT and Johnny Gargano and all these guys. They got to be on TV for a while. You got to do these video packages. You got to hype them up. You got to give us reasons for us to care. And one of the prime reasons and one of the easiest ways to get people to care is by having them win and win often. When Jim Ross is saying that the Bucks are the best tag team in the world and Kenny Omega's the best, and then they lose, that makes Jim Ross look bad. And I'm not the only person that's brought that up. I've had friends in the business have brought it up. I know a few other people have brought it up in the industry. Just in general, it's just quality control. The talent is all there, but it really does come off that they're booking week to week. And I think with some of the silly gimmicks too, it's cool with people like Marco Stunt, it's cool with people like Orange Cassidy, but I think that stuff should kind of be in moderation. It shouldn't be front and center, because I think when you do that kind of silly comedy and you have some things that are hard to explain, like, hey, let's have a random 4-way for the women's title, you come off more like WWE. And when NXT comes across less like a WWE product than AEW does in recent weeks, I think that's a problem.
The only person in that Statlander situation, the only person I don't put any blame on is Statlander, because she's just looking for a payday. She's been busting her ass in the indies for so long that she probably wasn't even thinking of it. She was thinking, hey, oh man, like, this is a big opportunity. And they're putting me over right away. Like, I'm getting a title shot right away. And honestly, I thought the build was okay. And then it kind of deflates with these little hiccups like, oh, snap, she double booked. And I know people would probably blame her for but, when you've been hungry for so long, sometimes in the excitement of signing that big deal. And look, for some of these folks, like, I don't think Orange Cassidy ever expected to be on a platform like TNT. That's not a diss or disrespect or however you want to say on Orange Cassidy. I love the guy. I want to be Orange Cassidy when I grow up. But, it's for him. This is the most people that have ever seen him do this shtick. And now he's on GIFs that people are using all the time as, I don't care, and so, I get that sometimes the wrestlers thinking what's best for business for them. People can trash it, but at the end of the day, it's like nobody did their homework. Maybe she doesn't have an agent. This is a business where sometimes it's they're negotiating their own deals.
Or you know what? Maybe just maybe to compare AEW to TNA, that those deals that are quote unquote exclusive aren't really all that exclusive, which could leave them prone to having talent getting poached by Ring of Honor or New Japan or WWE.
Right. I mean, shoot, you got Jericho and Moxley doing Wrestle Kingdom, and holy crap, that stipulation that came out of the blue. If Tanahashi wins, he gets a AEW title shot. I thought there was a problem between those two companies. I don't, and maybe they're just messing with us. Maybe this is all a work. Maybe we're all getting worked. I don't know. I completely even forgot about that. Then there's, you don't know who's with, AAA. I think the Lucha Brothers are with AEW, but I also know they do AAA shows, and so maybe you're right. Maybe it's a situation with TNA that maybe contracts aren't as exclusive as they seem, which is fine. If they're going to operate like a bigger, more well-funded indie operation, I don't want to call them that, but if that's the route they're going to take, cool, okay. That's going to lead to more situations like this with Statlander, because I was kind of excited for that. Now it's like, a four-way, okay. That might, and that's something you noted earlier, and that's to like Riho hasn't been on TV for a while. I've seen more of Awesome Kong than I have of Riho. She's your champion. And we haven't seen a package months on. You haven't given me a reason to care. I like her in the ring. She's no Io Shirai. But I like her in the ring.
But you mentioned that too. Sorry to interrupt. Like the packages, man, the hype videos, like that. And to be fair, NXT for the first few weeks didn't do a great job of that either. But they've gotten better over time. Like we need some hype videos. We need a reason to care about these people. You and I follow wrestling pretty closely, and even you and I aren't familiar with everybody they throw on TV on AEW Dynamite, right? I mean,
no.
What happened to the vignettes?
I get that some of that is done on Being the Elite, but I'm sorry, I can't even watch Major League Wrestling like I want to watch it because I only have X amount of time in my day, let alone the vignettes, the side stuff like Being the Elite, and it's funny. I watch wrestling with a friend who is always open-minded about the product she sees in front of her, and one of their biggest complaints is, there's no reason, there's no package, there's no reason for me to care. Why should I care about Riho? Okay, you did that for Britt Baker, but you know what I mean? It's they do it for some, they don't do it for others. You don't do it for your champions. It goes to the inconsistency, and maybe they need like an Arn Anderson. Again, I go back to like a lot of WCW's success is because they had a guy like Eric Bischoff kind of, when he was lights on, he manned that to a different, much stratosphere where you have Karl Malone and Rodman headlining a pay-per-view. And then, you have, someone like Paul Heyman. Maybe you don't know how to manage money, but the man can tell a story. And ECW was successful as much for cornball stories about Raven and Beulah and Tommy Dreamer. We gave a damn, because of the storytelling. And the problem with there was just, mismanagement of money. Give Paulie the book, don't give him the books, I guess. And I love Paulie. That to me is like my sports business sensei. I love studying sports business, and he has a unique mind for it. And you just don't feel they have that. Kenny Omega hasn't been able to do that. Cody, whoever's doing the booking, I don't know if it's the wrestlers themselves. I know at one point, I don't know if it was a work, George Janela was complaining about it being kind of rudderless, but there's something that's just lacking. They have a lot of good stuff to build on. They've developed a ferocious fan base. They managed to cobble a lot of that anti-WWE sentiment in their direction. And they have, they have mainstream attention. They got Blink-182 to being in one of their Being the Elite videos, for Christ's sakes. But it's just weird. They're missing that one, I guess, quarterback. It doesn't have to be a story writer, like a Hollywood story writer, like, WWE does. Maybe it doesn't have to be an old school guy like Dutch Mantel or retreads or, God forbid, what's his face? Russo. Yeah. But they're missing something. That Bischoff, that Vince, or that Heyman in the booking department. So
Right, and I think too something to note. Based on what we know, based on multiple reports and everything, particularly from the Rap.com, I think was the one that originally reported it. The TNT deal is an ad-based deal, so from what I understand, outside of maybe some production costs that we don't know about, TNT is only paying AEW, I think, an ad revenue split. They're not getting a guarantee, whereas WWE, I think, for NXT, is getting tens of millions of dollars for that, and obviously they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars for Raw. And they're getting upwards of over $2 billion for SmackDown over the course of 5 years from Fox. So you look at that guaranteed money, and while AEW is doing relatively well on pay-per-view, while they've done all right on certain live events, and they are running smaller venues that don't cost as much to rent as, say, NBA arenas, and while they do have a rabid fan base that does buy merchandise, that does consume their content on YouTube, which leads to ad revenue and some other revenue streams, the reality is they're not getting the biggest revenue stream that can keep a company alive in today's pro wrestling, which is TV money. And you wonder, while they are a great deal for TNT, will TNT get to a point where they say, you know what, okay, we recognize there's viability here. We're not just going to air some commercials and maybe occasionally have them inside the NBA. We're actually going to pay them a guaranteed fee like Spike TV did with Impact and eventually with the Ultimate Fighter. Or they're going to say, you know what, hey, it's cheap programming. We're content leaving it the way it is. And is it possible that maybe AEW, I don't want to say could fold, but dare I say within a year from now, look for a new TV partner if they're not getting a guarantee?
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if they go looking for a better deal. There's always a need for content. With so many digital platforms out there, with so many channels out there, with ESPN Plus, there's always somebody still, TNA is still popping up. Let me not disrespect them because Impact has been doing some decent stuff of late, but Impact is still somehow alive and kicking in some way on television. And that hasn't been, we've witnessed it, to a degree, the highs and lows of that company. I don't, as long as they don't get mismanaged like that, I think actually they can flex a better TV deal so long as they put a solid product and prove that they have consistency in bringing in X amount of fans. If they can keep these numbers up and show that they can generate this much revenue, maybe that doesn't work out with Turner, but like I said, there's always somebody looking for content. I'm not saying they end up on Pursuit, but they
need to end up on a channel that people are actually going to watch. I mean, let's keep it real. The reason Impact is kind of in business still right now is because they have a billionaire that doesn't have a great history of running networks or entities, but I think he actually even inherited that money. But but regardless, they literally had to buy a TV network and access in order to kind of stay alive and stay semi-relevant.
Like I can see someone like maybe there's enough networks out there where if they put up enough revenue for TNT that maybe they can leverage that into a better deal. You're always looking for a better deal. Now that said, for TNT, this is like easy money for them because it's like this is more pluses than minuses. It's content. It's not a marriage. It's more like, we're still, it's more like they're steady. You know what I mean? It's not even an engagement ring, to be honest. Like it's we're still feeling each other out, getting to know stage. There's a lot of pluses for them in this. Maybe they're even testing the waters for how much they want to get into wrestling. But if that helps keep them afloat, you take what you get. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. No,
better, better to be the stepchild at TNT than the darling of Pursuit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know what? I think too, if TNT was able to throw them a few $1,000,000, I would think it'd probably still be cheaper to produce AEW to an extent than invest in a whole new scripted program. I mean, I could be wrong, but I would imagine Dynamite, paying like X amount for Dynamite, $5 million, $10 million a year for Dynamite might still be cheaper than say, funding a show like Walking Dead.
Right. I mean, Walking Dead, that's, you're talking about, sci-fi can get pricey. Maybe a show like Claws is cheaper to produce, and but this is still content where it's for them it's low risk financially. It's not like the WCW days where they were just throwing money. Jesus Christ, I don't think it's ever going to get in the financial sense. I don't think it's ever going to get that big again. I think as far as fans, this is a golden era because we have options with New Japan, we have options with AEW, we have options with WWE Network. If you're into the indie scene, there's apps like Fight App that show you anything from Joey Ryan's Penis Party to Ring of Honor. You know, and the thing is, I'm not even being facetious when I say that Joey Ryan pay-per-view, because that's wrestling in 2019. Whatever you're into, it's out there. That's why I think funny and sad that the Bucks are listening. Let me rephrase that. Let me walk that back. I think it's great they got off Twitter to get away from that bitter wrestling fan, whether it's that holdover from the Attitude Era or the holdover from the Rock and Wrestling Era, that just watches to be miserable.
Where do you see AEW a year from now?
I see them as probably breaking even because it's still a startup. That's if that's a good year with the gates and the merch and all that. I see the storylines improving, and I'd like to see the Kenny Omega that had 7-star matches return. And I don't care against who, you know. But I'd like to see that guy back. Maybe he misses Ibushi that much. Who knows? I don't know what to say. But he's the other piece that they kind of need to shine. And this isn't, you know, jobbing isn't the way. And I understand they're trying to build some, but yeah.
You got to build yourself up first. And yeah, I mean, I hope they're around in a year. I think they will be. I mean, it's tough. They could very easily be just another show. You know, they could very easily slide into that TNA Impact territory from the mid-2000s where at first it was a hot, shiny new thing in wrestling, and then it's kind of like, all right, like this is a show. It's cool. Some days are good. Some days are bad. And, you know, I think the wrestling quality is higher here as far as like week to week because of, you know, the competition with NXT. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough. I think for me, it all depends on if they get that quality control. If somebody's the big boy in the room and says, listen, like, yo, we got to short things up. And I think it's just a matter of, you know, and we'll talk about this too. I think if they can come to a deal with New Japan, if people can put egos aside, come to a deal with New Japan, work together, try to take a more serious approach. You know, try to take more of the approach that Cody and Jericho have taken with their programs, where it's a little more serious. There's some comedy there, but it's usually a little more serious. It's almost always logical. It makes sense. Easy stories that we can follow. You know, you can have the high-flying stuff. That's cool and everything, but it's not just about their in-ring style. I think it's just about following the stories. You can have whatever style of wrestling you want if the stories make sense and there's a good payoff at the end, you know, and it's engaging characters, engaging promos. So if going into 2020, they can do more video packages, do more human interest pieces, even at the bare minimum, do what UFC does where they show the same generic video package before each fight. I mean, at least it's something to make us care about these people. I think over time, I mean, look, they're already way ahead of the game, and other people have come on the scene, and for as short of a time as they've been around, if they can shore up on these things, I think they'll be all right. And then it's just a matter of something they can't control at the moment, which is TNT eventually paying them a guarantee.
Yeah.
But at the very least, I think they'll still have good matches. Whether or not there'll be logic that accompanies those good matches, that remains to be seen. But obviously, we both wish them the very best.